Victor was hurrying down the long marble corridor of the business center, barely paying attention to anyone around him. His mind was occupied with numbers, contracts, and an upcoming meeting that could decide the future of his company. Years of success had trained him to look straight ahead, not to the sides. People had become background noise, faces without stories, roles without names. As he passed by, he almost didn't notice the cleaning lady. She was mopping the floor near the windows, moving slowly, carefully, as if afraid to disturb the polished silence of the building. She wore a simple uniform, faded from countless washes, and her hands were rough, marked by years of hard work. Nothing about her stood out, except one small detail. For a brief second, something caught the light. Victor stopped. It was a pendant. A small silver locket hung from a thin chain around the woman's neck. It was old, slightly scratched, but unmistakable. His breath caught in his chest. The world around him seemed to blur, the sounds of footsteps and distant voices fading away. He knew that pendant. His heart began to pound, not with the stress of business, but with a feeling he hadn't experienced in decades, something dangerously close to fear. "That's impossible," he whispered to himself. He had last seen that pendant more than 30 years ago. Victor turned slowly and looked at the woman again, this time really looking. She was focused on her work, unaware that a stranger's entire past had just resurfaced because of the small object resting against her chest. "Excuse me," Victor said, his voice lower than usual. The woman flinched slightly and looked up. Her eyes were tired but kind, the kind of eyes that had seen more disappointment than joy. She straightened nervously, clearly not used to being addressed by men in expensive suits. "Yes," she asked politely. "That pendant," Victor said, pointing. "Where did you get it?" The woman instinctively covered the locket with her hand. Her expression changed, guarded, almost fearful. "It's mine," she replied quietly. "I've had it for many years." "I know," Victor said, struggling to keep his voice steady. "That's why I'm asking." She hesitated. People like him didn't usually ask questions. They gave orders or complaints. Curiosity from someone like Victor felt dangerous. "My mother gave it to me," she said finally. "Before she died." Victor felt as if the floor beneath him had shifted. "What was your mother's name?" he asked. The woman frowned, confused by the personal question. But something in his eyes, something vulnerable and unfamiliar, made her answer. "Anna," she said. "Anna Petrova." Victor's heart stopped. Memories he had buried deep inside himself began to claw their way back to the surface. A small apartment, the smell of cheap coffee, a young woman with tired eyes but a warm smile, and a silver pendant she never took off. Did she ever tell you where she got it?" Victor asked. The woman nodded slowly. "She said it was a gift. From someone she loved, but that he disappeared." Victor closed his eyes. He was that someone. 35 years ago, Victor had been a very different man. Poor, ambitious, and terrified of failure. Anna had been his world back then. She believed in him when he had nothing, no money, no influence, no guarantees. When he got his first real opportunity, a chance to move to another city and start fresh, he made a choice that would haunt him forever. He left, not because he stopped loving her, but because he loved success more. Because he was afraid that staying with her would slow him down. He promised himself he would come back when he made it. He never did. "Your mother," Victor said slowly, "was very important to me." The woman studied his face. Something about him felt familiar, though she couldn't say why. She waited, the woman said quietly. For a long time, she used to look at that pendant and say that one day, he would come back. But he never did. Every word felt like a blow. "What's your name?" Victor asked. "Maria," she answered. Victor swallowed hard. He had a daughter. Not a business legacy. Not a corporate empire. A human being. "I didn't know," Victor said, his voice breaking. "If I had known." "But you didn't," Maria said, not unkindly. "Just honest. She raised me alone. It wasn't easy. But she loved me. That was enough." Victor nodded. For the first time in years, he felt ashamed of everything he had built. "I'm sorry," he said. "I can't change the past. But I want to do something now. If you'll let me." Maria looked at him carefully. She had learned not to trust easily. Life had taught her that promises were fragile things. "I'm not asking for money," she said firmly, as if anticipating his thoughts. "I don't want charity." "I'm not offering charity," Victor replied. "I'm offering truth and responsibility." Silence stretched between them. "I am your father," Victor said. The words hung in the air, heavy and irreversible. Maria felt her knees weaken. She had imagined this moment many times, wondered who he was, whether he was alive, whether he had ever thought of them. But standing here, with a stranger in an expensive suit claiming to be her father, felt unreal. "My mother never spoke badly of you," Maria said softly. "She said people make choices when they're afraid." Victor nodded. Tears filled his eyes, something no employee had ever seen. "I was afraid," he admitted. "And I was wrong." Maria looked down at the pendant, then back at him. "This is all I have left of her," she said. "It was meant to protect you," Victor said. She believed that. Maria took a deep breath. "I don't know what this means," she said honestly. "I don't know if I can just accept you." "You don't have to," Victor replied. "Not today, not ever, if you choose. I just want the chance to know you. To be there, even if it's late." Late. That word echoed painfully between them. After a long pause, Maria nodded slightly. "We can talk," she said. "That's all I can promise." Victor smiled. A real smile, not the polished one he wore in boardrooms. "That's more than I deserve," he said. As Maria returned to her work, Victor walked away a different man. The meeting he had been rushing to no longer mattered. For the first time in decades, success felt small compared to the weight of what he had lost, and what he might still find. That day, a simple pendant did what no deal, no contract, and no amount of money ever could. It reminded Victor of who he was, and who he still had a chance to become. The days after their meeting passed slowly for Victor, each hour heavier than the last. For the first time in years, he woke up without checking his phone for emails or stock prices. His thoughts returned again and again to Maria, her calm voice, her guarded eyes, the way she held the pendant as if it were a shield against the world. He had spent decades building a life on control and certainty, yet one unexpected encounter had shattered both. Maria, on the other hand, tried to return to her routine. She cleaned offices, hallways, and staircases just as she always had. But nothing felt the same. Every reflection in the glass walls seemed unfamiliar, as if she were seeing herself for the first time through someone else's eyes. The word, father, echoed in her mind, heavy and confusing. She had lived her entire life without that word having a face. Now it had one, and it wore a tailored suit and carried a past full of silence. 3 days later, Victor returned to the building, not as a hurried executive, but as a man waiting. He stood near the windows where they had first spoken, rehearsing words that never seemed good enough. When Maria appeared, pushing her cart down the corridor, she froze. "I didn't expect you back so soon," she said cautiously. "I wasn't sure if you'd want to see me at all," Victor replied. "But I couldn't stop thinking about you." She nodded, neither inviting nor rejecting the conversation. "I meant what I said," Maria said. "We can talk, but slowly." "Of course," Victor said quickly. "At your pace." They sat at a small cafe across the street during her break. It was modest, quiet, the kind of place Victor hadn't stepped into for years. The contrast between his world and hers felt painfully obvious, but he tried not to let it show. "Tell me about my mother," he said softly. Maria looked down at her cup. She worked 2 jobs most of her life. She was tired a lot. But she never complained. She used to sing while cooking, even when we barely had enough. And every birthday, no matter how little money we had, she baked a cake herself. Victor listened, his hands trembling slightly. "She loved you," Maria continued. "Not in a dramatic way. Just, quietly. She kept your memory alive without making it heavy." "I didn't deserve that," Victor whispered. "No," Maria said honestly. "You didn't. But she gave it anyway." That truth hurt more than anger would have. Over the following weeks, their conversations continued. Sometimes awkward, sometimes painfully honest. Victor learned about Maria's childhood, her struggles, her dreams she never had time to chase. Maria learned about Victor's rise to success, his regrets, and the loneliness hidden behind his achievements. One evening, Maria asked the question she had been avoiding. "Why didn't you come back?" she asked. Victor didn't try to justify himself. "I was afraid," he said. "Afraid that if I returned, I'd see everything I'd abandoned. Afraid that I wouldn't be forgiven. And then time passed, and the longer I stayed away, the harder it became." Maria nodded slowly. "Fear is expensive," she said. "Someone always pays for it." Victor had no response. Weeks turned into months. Victor insisted on helping, but Maria was firm about keeping her independence. He respected that. Instead of offering money, he offered presents. He attended her small milestones, an evening class she enrolled in, a modest celebration for a promotion to supervisor. He listened more than he spoke. One day, Maria invited him to her apartment. It was small but warm, filled with plants and framed photos of her mother. Victor felt as if he were stepping into a life he should have been part of all along. This was hers, Maria said, handing him the pendant. She wanted you to see it again. Victor held it carefully, as if it might break. I remember the day I gave it to her, he said. I told her it was a promise. Maria met his eyes. Promises don't disappear when people break them, she said. They just wait. That night, Victor cried alone for the first time in decades. As their bond slowly grew, Victor began to change. He delegated more, worked less, and questioned the values he had once worshipped. His colleagues noticed. Some admired it, others didn't understand it. Victor no longer cared. One afternoon, Maria asked him something unexpected. Do you regret your life? She asked. Victor thought carefully. I regret parts of it, he said. But without those mistakes, I wouldn't have found you. Maria smiled faintly. I don't know if I forgive you yet, she said. But I'm glad you're here now. That was enough. Months later, they stood together at Anna's grave. Maria placed fresh flowers. Victor stood silently beside her, his head bowed. I'm sorry I came so late, he whispered. The wind carried his words away, but Maria heard them. As they walked away, Maria slipped her hand into his. It was a small gesture, hesitant, but real. The past could not be rewritten. But the future, fragile and uncertain, had finally begun.